In the last episode of Golden Girls Podcast, episode 66, I had the honor of interviewing Aditya Jaykumar, certified breathwork practitioner and host of one of the top spiritual podcasts in the world, My Seven Chakras. Aditya is all about bringing ancient wisdom to the world for the modern mind, and today, for all of us Golden Girls podcast listeners. In our first episode together, the last one, number 66, we talk about getting into the state of flow versus presence, the role our nervous systems play in our life, and why it matters so much. We also talk about how to bring bliss and playfulness into our life every day. So if you haven't listened yet, make sure you go back and check that out. In this episode, we dive into a variety of healing modalities and creating natural altered states of consciousness. You're going to learn to do things, how to do this, how to create these altered states of consciousness from breathwork, floatation, the science and the power behind brief intermittent hypoxia, aka holding your breath. You're also going to hear about the power of yawning and not just be told that it's rude. Thank you, Aditya, for that. And about the ancient practice of qigong. Aditya also spoke candidly about the recent resurgence in the interest in these ancient practices, the real cultural appropriation and cultural distancing that has happened, and the importance of respectful, conscious use of these practices. There's a lot of deep conversations and thoughts weaved in throughout, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode. There's such a collective desire right now for each of us, personally and as a community, as a society, to move away from the negative things like the anxiety, the burnout, the grief, the creative blocks, and create more of those really beautiful things in life, the creativity, vision, bliss, purpose, joy that we all want. And I believe that now's the time to really talk about and tap into more simple, holistic ways of doing this. So I know you're going to love the ideas that we talk about in this episode. And I invite you to not worry about implementing everything, but really think about what's one or two things that you can really give it a try. In this episode, Aditya is exploring and sharing wisdom on some of the best modalities out there to create flow, to reduce anxiety, and create more creativity, fulfillment, and bliss in your life. You're going to learn how to calm your mind, relax your nervous system, and have more bliss in your life. And I think we're all ready for that. If you haven't already, make sure you go back and listen to the last episode to get that foundation of where we're going and understand the flow and consciousness and where we're going. And in this episode, get ready. You're going to walk away with simple, practical, proven, evidence-based techniques and methods to improve the quality of your life and notice a paradigm shift in how you look at and live your life. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Golden Girls Podcast, where we believe you can have it all. I'm your host, Lisa Michaud, and I'm spilling tangible tips, goal-getting strategies, and real-life stories to inspire you to tackle your biggest dreams. You're a woman who knows you're made for more. Get ready to leave the excuses and self-doubt behind by being vulnerable, sharing your truth, and having honest conversations so you can succeed on your terms. Together, we'll set goals you'll actually achieve by staying motivated, having fun, and building a community of women empowering women. It's time to tap into your best self, get confident, and truly have it all. Golden Girl, let's dive in. Welcome back. I'm so grateful to be here with Aditya again. Aditya, thank you for being here for another episode of our podcast.
You're very welcome, Lisa. It's a lot of fun so far.
Oh, good. Well, we'll keep the fun going. Yeah. So if you're just tuning in right now, make sure you go back and listen to the last episode where Aditya broke down for us the difference between flow and presence. We talked about how having flow can help you access your intuition, help you to access more creativity, productivity, joy, calm, creativity, all these wonderful things. And we also talked about how our nervous systems in the modern world right now are really, for lack of a better way to say it, are really taking a beating. They're really struggling to keep up, and we need to rebalance that in order to really, truly thrive as humans, no matter what your definition of success is, no matter what your goal, no matter what it is that you want, we believe that you deserve to thrive. So go back and listen to that episode first. And in this episode, we're breaking down some of the different modalities on how we can actually create more flow, on how we can create more presence, playfulness, calm our nervous system. And we're going to wrap it up with a couple spiritual questions as well. So let's go right to I believe this is your kind of biggest area of expertise, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But breathwork, and is that right? Is that kind of your biggest piece here, Aditya?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things I really love about you and your podcast, My Seven Chakras, and we're going to link to that, so make sure you go listen to that, is that you really do look at how do we bring Eastern wisdom and methods to the modern world. I probably just butchered your slogan, but breathwork is one of the ways that you do that. So talk to us about breathwork. What's the science behind it? Is it just breathing? Because I feel like we do that anyways, but what's the difference between the breathing I'm doing right now versus conscious breath work that you teach and this healing modality?
Yeah, like you rightly put, you're breathing right now, and if we don't breathe, we don't live, right? We can go for, I don't know how many days, I think maybe 20 days without food. We can go for a number of days without water even. We're still going to be good. But if an average person, if somebody pinches your nose and doesn't allow you to breathe for at least even 60 seconds, 65, you're going to have really difficulty, right? And that speaks to how important and significant breathing is for us, right? And breathing is connected to our nervous system and to literally everything that we do, right? If you look at the Latin language, inspirar means to breathe in, inspirar. And inspiration is connected to breathing in the right breath, right? When we're inspired, our breathing changes. We're inspired, when we're in awe, when we're in a state of wonder, and these are all connected to being in flow as well from our previous conversation. And expirar means to breathe out, but expire means also to die, right? And so it just speaks to that if you expire, breathe out too much, and if you hold your breath too long beyond everything possible, then that means that you die, because that is how important breathing is for us as well, right? And so we can live life in either of two ways. We can let our surroundings and the situation and other people and our emotions determine how we breathe, and that can be erratic, confusing, without any structure or pattern. Or we can use breathing to influence our surroundings, our situations, our interactions, and everything that we do, right? So breath work to me is understanding this connection between breathing and our life, and then adding a sense of structure, a balance, to influence our nervous system, to influence our heart rate, to influence our brain, to influence the quality and amount of oxygen that reaches our mitochondria, so that we can have the energy to really thrive and go beyond just survival. And that's exactly what it is. There are different breathing techniques, there are different mechanisms, there are different methods, and there are different practices that allow us to influence our life in a meaningful and impactful way. So that for me is breath work. And obviously there are different types of breath work, there are different techniques within breath work, but broadly speaking, that's what the umbrella of breath work is all about, is about influencing the energy of us using these practices.
Amazing. And this just a little spoiler alert here. Make sure you stay until the end, because Aditya is going to lead us through a mini breathwork session, and he has a special gift for you guys as well. So make sure you stick around to the end to learn more. So where do you find, and how do you find breathwork actually helps, in that moment, and then also beyond? How does it impact your life and the other people you teach and empower to practice it on their own?
Yeah, so breathwork, like you've implied, is a spectrum, different techniques, and there are different types of sessions as well. So for example, in my group, we do a Sunday morning breathwork awakening journey. That's like a 90-minute, session, which includes breathwork and some mantra, some beautiful guided visualizations. You're relaxing your whole body, right? But in that 90-minute session, you get a reset for the whole week. You feel much better. But you can't do a 90-minute session every day, maybe not, at least for people who are homeowner, people who are like parents or mothers or fathers might not be that practical. So for
Okay,
them,
thank you for acknowledging that.
right? Exactly.
Thanks.
So then you might do like a 15-minute session. You can do a 10-minute, you can do a 5-minute session, and you can do a 2-minute session as well. And that is more like a reset, Like for example, in the morning, and I know some people have coffee and some people have given up coffee. But then how do you get your brain and your body into a state of alertness, a state of focus? And that is opposite from, what maybe traditionally people think about breath. Breath work is to relax. Sometimes you need to get your body to be alert. Sometimes you need to be in a more sympathetic dominant state. Maybe you're preparing for work, or maybe you're preparing for a brainstorming session. And so then you're taking in more, because when you breathe in, your body goes into sympathetic dominance. When you breathe out, your body goes into parasympathetic. So you can balance it in such a way, right? So then your body will go to either sympathetic or parasympathetic. So like I said, so you're breathing in more, a little bit more sympathetic. But if you breathe in and then really nice and elongated exhales, you're parasympathetic, right? But if you balance your breathe in and out, so you're doing a 2x2 or a 4x4, that's when a beautiful state is triggered, which is called heart coherence, right? So what it is, and there's a lot of research done by the Heart Math Institute. Usually the brain is at the center, right? The brain is giving instructions, in terms of what we need to do or we don't need to do. Some of it is voluntary, some of it is involuntary. But basically the brain is considered the seat of, decision making and functioning. But if you look at it, the heart is very similar to the brain. The heart does have, I think it's neurons, if I'm not mistaken, but it's similar to the brain in terms of its structure, right? So when you're able to stimulate heart coherence, the center becomes the heart and not the brain. So the heart is then sending signals to the brain as opposed to the brain sending signals to the heart. And then the heart sends signals to our different body parts as well. And both you and me know that if we let our heart make decisions, we're going to be in a more symbiotic, mutually beneficial, heart-based, life and community. And that's where I think where our society needs to move towards is to use these practices and techniques so that we're making decisions not just based on our brain and logic and what's going to happen in the next 1 month or 2 months. That's great. I think data is useful to make great decisions, but also we need to include our heart in a decision-making procedure. And I feel breath work, heart coherence-based breath work, is able to help us get there.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I mean, if you didn't already listen to the last episode, now this is your second reminder. Just go back and listen to it, because what you just said there about this parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, about how breath work is like literally the activation and potential to rebalance that. Like that's so powerful. And also, I am very curious to get off this and Google Heart Math Institute. Like I love that. What a combination.
Yeah.
So good. And it was really interesting to see how your different breaths, like I could literally feel the energy shift even in the room as you did more of the exhaling, and really fascinating. One of the things I notice, I mean, even just as I'm speaking right now, I can feel my body like wanting to yawn more, probably because I'm like so relaxed. So does that mean that if I need more energy, I need to inhale more? Is that what that means?
Oh, actually, one of my mentors, Dan Brole, very intelligent, very wise breathwork teacher. He speaks highly about yawns. Yawn is actually a good thing. Right? Yawn can happen automatically, but you can induce a yawn as well. And that really,
Is everybody yawning now listening, I bet?
And yawn and sigh also. Just letting go, and then shaking, including some shaking your hands, right?
Yeah.
It has a way of boosting circulation, stimulating your lymphatic system, and then you're like, very intuitively using all these different triggers like shaking and yawning and sighing and breathing, elongating breaths, and all of a sudden, within 2 minutes, you feel much more relaxed. You feel reset as well.
Oh,
right?
So interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting, because I'm like sitting here like, oh, I feel so rude yawning, and that's like our society has taught us to like see it as a rude thing, and or like to really like cover it up. But that's really interesting. I have an incredible therapist too that I work with.
Okay.
And same thing, she always, when she sees me yawning, it's really interesting because when we do some somatic work as well, and we can always tell that we've kind of broken through a certain point when I start to yawn.
Yeah.
And it's just so fascinating because
Yeah.
I feel like I grew up most of my life being told to stifle my yawns.
Yeah.
And being told, like, cover your mouth, don't let people see, like that. So, I mean, that's just really cool. Really an interesting shift there. Yeah.
Just to add, I think, so my theory, and we
I'm
can
totally
go
just
to
going to
other
yawn over
theories
here,
as
by the
well.
way. Sorry.
Totally. I won't take that personally.
Okay, it's not you, it's me.
So there, the human spectrum, right? You have extremely young children, and then you have extremely old people. For some reason, I feel that we've lost on the knowledge and wisdom that comes from these extreme spectrums, right? And so, like you pointed out, when we're in school, when we yawn, the teacher tells us, right, don't yawn. It's rude. Or maybe when we shake, when we play and shake, they said, don't shake so much, right? It's rude. Guests, your family members will not take it so seriously. And also, like, even when it comes to food preferences, right? Like sometimes the child doesn't want to have breakfast. Maybe like, you have to have breakfast. Okay.
Oh, that was just Alexa popping in there. What were we talking about?
Always listening.
We didn't even say anything controversial there.
I know, weird. But yeah, this is the breakfast piece, right? And sometimes children don't like milk, but then milk was forced down their throats, and now you come to know that, some people might actually be allergic to milk, intolerant to milk, right? And I think maybe when a child is saying something, maybe there's a glimpse of truth into it, and maybe we need to research some more and then find out more information, right? So we're finding out all these, I don't know, truisms and things that people said were good for us. Maybe it's not so good for us. Maybe we need to listen to our bodies some more.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah. Yes, that's, we talked about that on the episode with Danielle about relationship to food and like listening to ourselves, and it's so true. And I believe that so much with children.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think about my work as a coach and even my own journey, and maybe you can relate to this, like it's been unlearning and relearning myself, like unlearning societal expectations, including that it's okay to yawn, and relearning who I am and re-getting to know myself. And I look at this opportunity to raise my daughter, and I'm doing it imperfectly. She'll probably listen to this and be like, Mom, you messed all these things up. But just really, I do try and think about that, because I believe we are born with more intuition and more knowing than we give ourselves credit for, and so it's such a gift. So what does the science behind breathwork say? Because there's some pretty, and you probably, I'm assuming, to work in some of the organizations that you've gotten to work in, or like, it's not just, and I don't even mean to discredit, but I feel like in our society sometimes we almost like need that science to believe it. Hopefully we're changing it. But like, for example, Wim Hof has I've seen some of the stuff that's come out from him. He's probably one of the most well-known in kind of modern breathwork world. Like, some of his research is absolutely incredible around what they've been able to do with breathwork. Is there anything, any particular pieces of science or data that you find really fascinating, or that you find really impressive that you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things is, there's so much of science to breathing, for sure. But if you look at, people living in high altitudes, generally, they tend to be more healthy. They tend to live longer. And what they found is that they have much more red blood cells, right? And there was a lot of research that was conducted by Russian scientists. This was back, I think, in the 1960s, maybe, when there was a Cold War going on. And what happened then is, USA and Russia were in adversarial positions. So each one, were getting their best doctors, best scientists to research and find out how they can have an upper edge. What ended up happening was doctors in Russia and Ukraine did a lot of research, but unfortunately, because of the language barrier, it was not passed on to USA and maybe other parts of the world, right? And so what they did was they realized this thing, that people in high altitudes do have that biological advantage for one reason or the other. And they did a lot of testing, and they found out, yes, that confirms it. They also noticed that when their fighter pilots spent a lot of time at high altitudes in the fighter jets, they did have those biological advantages. right? In terms of higher red blood cells. When you have higher red blood cells, you're able to carry more oxygen. We're able to carry more oxygen. Your mitochondria is able to get more oxygen, more energy. And this has like ripple effects on all aspects of your life. So they used to that. So they were the ones who started oxygen training, oxygen deprivation training, where they used to create like machines or compartments which for a short period of time used to limit the amount of oxygen available. And they used to wear those masks back in those days as well. So you've seen like elite athletes and stuff like that, they wear those masks and they do sprints, right? That's because to restrict the amount of oxygen. Because
fascinating.
Yeah, so they want to induce what is called brief intermittent hypoxia. So brief intermittent hypoxia, what it is basically is, so when we breathe in oxygen, right? Just because we are taking in oxygen, it doesn't mean that the oxygen is actually getting into the mitochondria at the cellular level, right? So what tends to happen is when you breathe in, at a certain concentration, the oxygen binds with the hemoglobin. It sticks to the hemoglobin. And then that means if you breathe in too much, if you're over breathing, you're actually not getting energy. That's why when people hyperventilate, they feel very tired and drained. And they feel scared in a way because they're over breathing and the oxygen is sticking to the hemoglobin. So how do you ensure that the oxygen actually reaches where it needs to, which is the mitochondria? That is by reducing the concentration between oxygen and carbon dioxide. Well, how do you do that? By holding your breath. All right, so that's one of the ways.
Right.
So what happens is when you hold your breath, your carbon dioxide volume or concentration increases. That reverses what happens, which is the oxygen unbinds from the hemoglobin and then goes to the mitochondria, producing energy. So that's one of the components of breath work, is at least yogic breath work. At a certain point, you hold your breath for a defined amount of time, and then you feel so energized, you feel so recharged, because that's what's happening physiologically.
Okay, so interesting.
Right? I forgot the name of the. That's called the Bohr's law, the Bohr's principle. So that's one thing that's happening, but there are so many other things that are happening. For example, now this is very interesting also. When the baby is in the womb, the amount of oxygen that is there in the womb is the same level that is there at the peak of Mount Everest. Okay, so very low oxygen. And we all know that the baby has access to stem cells in the womb. Now there's a relationship between the proliferation of stem cells and the oxygen levels. Right? Stem cells do not love high volumes of oxygen. So when the baby comes out of the body, the oxygen level automatically is very high. And so what ends up happening is, well, that people say that is one of the most traumatic experiences one can experience, is being born. Because it's like you're in a very peaceful, placid, perfect environment, and all of a sudden you're pulled out of somewhere and there are people all around you laughing or making loud noises. You're not used to the high levels of, you're adjusting.
The lights.
Right. And so in many ways it's traumatic for the baby. But also what tends to happen is that the stem cells, which were enjoying their time, they don't like the high levels of oxygen. So then they go into the crevices of your body, into the bones, the big bones, and they hide inside with a layer of RBC, red blood cells, covering them because they don't like oxygen. And so your ability to miraculously heal yourself using these stem cells, because as your listeners might or might not know, stem cells are very unique because they have the ability to multiply and replicate to form any types of cells. Your body needs nails, stem cells. Your body needs some, tissue to be rebuilt and repaired, stem cells. If you have a high level of stem cells, and now the doctors are also trying to, take out stem cells when the baby is born, so that later on in life they can inject stem cells. But that's a very artificial way of doing it, right? What if you could, at will, induce the proliferation of stem cells naturally, so that you can heal and you can repair your body? What if breathwork allows you to do that. And by holding your breath, you're for a short period of time inducing a low oxygen level in your blood. So then your stem cells automatically realize, wow, lockdown is over. And so they are able to go all across your body. Now, this is not me sharing this. You can actually see reports and peer-reviewed research by doctors to show the connectivity between stem cell proliferation and it's called brief intermittent hypoxia. Now, hypoxia is not good because that means low oxygen for a long period of time. Brief intermittent hypoxia is like 45, 60 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes as well. Like these deep divers are able to hold their breath for elongated periods of time. So when you stimulate brief intermittent hypoxia, that's the other thing that happens, stem cell proliferation, and which means healing.
Wow.
Right?
So cool. I don't know if anybody else is listening and wishing they'd paid more attention in biology class, but very, very, very cool. I feel so lucky to get to have this conversation with you right now because I just recently started getting into breath work in like November. So I'm very new to it, but I've learned the power. I'm learning the power of it. And I just, it's so cool to actually get to hear these things and learn. So do you find, and I feel like I could probably ask you a million questions and I'll try not to, but like, does it matter whether you hold the breath on the inhale or the exhale? And what, like, because I'm assuming there's many, like you said, there's many different styles of breath work, different reasons we would do it.
Yeah.
You know, my very limited understanding is that kind of what you said, like the amount that you inhale versus you exhale might be different.
Yeah.
I've seen like the intention you go in with it, I guess, would be different.
Yeah.
I would guess if you hold the breath when you're on the inhale, when you still have air in your lungs, that would be different than after you've exhaled everything and then to hold. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's different. Because the thing is, if you're trying to induce brief intermittent hypoxia, you want to be in a state where there is little or no oxygen in your body, right?
So that means you've exhaled everything and then you're holding. Yeah. Okay, that's what I've been doing, and I do find it magical.
Exhale hold is actually is more safe. So when it comes to breath work, it's the most important thing is set and setting. Just like when you do plant medicine, set and setting. The set is basically what you bring into the situation. Your background, your history, your allergies, your challenges, your block, your triggers, right? That's what you bring. Setting is what you come into. So that is the room, the energy, the ambiance, the people that you're meditating with, the person who's holding space for you. Now, if you're missing out on any of these things, if you've got a history of health issues, schizophrenia, something like that, it might affect your breathwork journey as well. So that's why safety is like super important. And we always announce contraindications, before we begin each journey, because there are so many different medical conditions. For example, if you're pregnant, it's not recommended to hold your breath.
Okay, yeah.
If you have heart conditions, if you've got a pacemaker installed, if you're full stomached, if you're coming from all-you-can-eat sushi, then breathwork is not recommended, right? There are so many different things to keep in mind that the person who's getting into the journey is fully safe. For example, if you're doing breathwork and your roommate shouts, it can re-traumatize you. Because you're in a relaxed state. You don't know, right? You're in a different vibe and a different place altogether.
Yeah.
So just to answer your question, when you're exhale hold, it's safer. You can hold your breath for 45 seconds, 60 seconds. That's good. But inhale hold, I would only recommend very little, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. That's it. Just release. Because you don't want the thing to get to your head. In fact, even when you're doing breath work, we recommend certain energetic locks to ensure that it doesn't go to your head. Because especially with people with tinnitus, so one of the energetic locks we recommend is the neck lock. So you exhale, hold your breath, and you gently tilt your head, touching your chin almost till your sternum. So this ensures that, at least from the yogic standpoint, the energy is locked into this container of your torso. Then you do the root lock as well. So basically you're clenching and squeezing your pelvic floor muscles to ensure that the energy that you're trying to cultivate does not escape into the ground. And then there's a third lock, which is the Uddiyana Bandha, which is the solar plexus lock. So what you're doing is you're gradually trying to visualize the energy, and also you're bringing the energy up, and then up, and it goes to the brain, and then you release. Because if you look at it from a yogic standpoint, there's something called Kundalini energy. The Kundalini energy is the dormant life force that resides at the base of everyone's spine. We understand that this energy is very powerful. That's why if you look at mainstream media, pushing sex narrative is so strong, right? Because it's a very and sex can be used to create, and it can be used to procreate, and it can be destructive force also, right? Sexual addiction, pornography, those kinds of things. But the yogis knew that this energy is very powerful, and so what they're trying to do is they're trying to transmute this very raw sexual energy into something that's more sublime, into a work of art, into a business, into something that's highly visionary, right? So that is what you're doing here. Taking the energy from the root, using these energetic locks, using breath work, using breath holds, and you're bringing it up into your brain. So that is sort of like a long way of explaining, what happens during a breathwork session. But to answer your question, safety is totally number one priority, and these energetic locks in a way ensure that you're safe.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I don't know if I'm very excited to get to the breathwork portion already.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to actually try it out with you. And it's so beautiful, so powerful. I think I want to touch on one more thing before we talk about some of the other pieces and other modalities. But you've kind of talked about the journey and setting, and even compared breathwork to plant medicine.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if you'd said this to me a couple months ago, and I said it to a girlfriend, that this can actually create a different state of consciousness, and that it can literally transform your mind just like alcohol or drugs can.
Yeah.
I would have been like, no, I can't. It's just breathing.
Yeah.
But I'm a believer, but what do you have to say about that in terms of the journey and the altered state of consciousness? What do you say to me or anybody else listening that's how do you create an altered state of consciousness? How do you do that without alcohol or drugs?
That's true.
For anyone else that's a skeptic like I was, or just didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand what that all meant, an altered state of consciousness, and how you can do that without altering something with a substance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, first of all, our ancient yogis and sages have experimented with a lot of things, right? They've experimented with the plant medicine, and they've experimented with drugs and things. This is thousands of years back when you had different types of plant medicine. Especially in India, you had soma. The soma was a concoction, just like ayahuasca, where you mix different plants, and you mix things and you drink it, and you get high. And so these were actually used at a certain point in order to connect with the gods and connect with the earth and nature, right? But at a certain point, according to tradition, what had happened was they realized that plant medicine is not a very sustainable method. And so that's when they devised things like breathwork, pranayam, and tantra in order to access these higher states of consciousness naturally. Right? And so, when you're breathing in this way, you are affecting your physiology, right? When you're, during your cyclical breaths, what's happening literally is that you are inducing the oxygen to stick to your hemoglobin. If you remember that I shared earlier. So you're in a way restricting the oxygen going to your brain as well, but for a short period of time, not forever. Right? And so what tends to happen also when you restrict the oxygen going to your very logical, the most recent part of our human brain, you are shutting off the part of your brain that is critical, that is yes and no, that is you're supposed to be doing this, you're not supposed to be doing that. So when you're cutting off your supply to that part, you access higher states of consciousness automatically, because you're connected with the world around you also. And your body is also, because the body is the ultimate pharmacy, it is creating certain endocannabinoids, it is creating certain endorphins, it is creating this rush of adrenaline. And so that's why at a chemical level as well, you're able to access these beautiful states of consciousness. Now, a lot of people say as well, and I think for the most part it's true, that when you breathe in this way, when you're using these very powerful mantras, when you are holding your breath, your brain does secrete DMT inside, maybe like a very small amount in your third eye. And that also helps you access these non-ordinary states of consciousness.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So cool to hear. I just love how it all comes together, Like,
Yeah.
I think it's really, the way I think we should be looking at it is that so many of these ancient tools,
Yeah.
we are now just validating them with science.
That's
it's
true.
not like science made them true. They were true.
They were true all the way, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. Okay, last thing I want to ask you, just if is there a certain style of breath work that you personally, teach or prefer? Or do you mix it up? Like, how does that work?
I think for me these days, I am open to experimenting with different breathing techniques and styles. I don't think there's one style that's made for any one person. It depends on where you're at in your life and what you crave. So I would encourage everyone to try different things out, right? I don't like to be too prescriptive. But for me, I like the yogic style because it has been there for thousands of years. It's tried and tested, right? And so for my breathwork journeys, usually there are a couple of components. One is, you start breathing in cycles. And since I'm a Soma breath instructor, Soma talks a lot about breathing in beats. So then there's a beat, there's a brainwave music, and you're breathing synchronized to those beats. What happens when you breathe in beats is, once again, you stimulate the heart coherence. Your heart becomes the center of your body. It's not your brain. Your heart is sending these very beautiful, relaxing responses across to your beat. It's almost as if your heart is listening to a philharmonic orchestra. That's what happens. So you're breathing in beats very nicely. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Okay? And then at a certain point, you are holding your breath. You get into the breath holds. Breathe in, breathe out, hold the breath. See how long you can hold. Then breathe in, hold. 15-20 seconds. Let go. Then you do some mantras. When you do mantras, you're vibrating your whole body. You're stimulating parasympathetic. You're toning your vagus nerve. That's one round. You do the second round, third round, and you mix different breathing styles. 4x4, 4x8, 2x2, things like that. So that depends on who's holding space and what he feels intuitively, he or she feels, is required by the group. Like in my case, a lot of times I don't pre-write the guided journey. I'll be like, this is what I sense the group needs right now, and invariably the group also says, this is what I needed. This is the word that you said at this point, and this is what triggered a state of deep, resonance or bliss within me. And so, yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Amazing. Okay, and we're all going to get a sample of it, a little bit of it at the end, so stay tuned. Okay, let's talk about flotation tanks. For those that don't know, flotation tanks, there's some in Vancouver. We both go to Float House, so shout out to them. Flotation tanks, I should have looked up the stats on this. Like, I don't know if you know how many, it's like a lot of salt. It's a whole lot of salt in a tank, and you float. And I'm curious, why do you float? What got you into it? And what do you find the benefits of it are?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think all of these things, whether it's breath work or even floating, are connected to the consciousness emergence or this revolution that happened in the West. I think this happened sometime in the 60s, where there was the Cold War, right? There was the Vietnam War, and there was a general distrust in the government, like what's happening right now. People didn't want countries spending so much of money on wars and things like that, right? So there was a general distrust, and people were looking for something different. And I think that's when, the Beatles came to India. They learned about yoga, meditation, right? And Jimi Hendrix and all the other musicians were also experimenting with LSD. Because some of these scientists discovered LSD, and they were like, wow, what's happening? They were studying what are the effects of LSD, like the consciousness expansion, profound states of being, awe, wonder, serendipity, synchronicity, and what that if we do this, what's going what are the gifts that are there to unlock. And so I think at a certain point the government, as usual, banned LSD, right? Because they don't want people to expand their minds. They don't want people to be free and full of liberty. I think there was this one guy who filled his truck with LSD. Do you know about that?
No,
You
I
don't
don't.
know?
No.
There was one crazy guy. So he had this van. He colored the van like psychedelic, flowers and stuff like that. And he filled his van with LSD, and he went from city to city, town to town, distributing free LSD so that people could get high, right? So
This was in America?
yeah,
In the 70s.
I think maybe 60s if I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
but that period. So there was a lot of consciousness development, a lot of people getting interested in meditation, yoga and all these Indian gurus coming from India and sharing their wisdom as well, right? And so when LSD was banned, so these the scientists were like, how do we figure things out? How do we access these states of consciousness without LSD? And so that is where that's where the flotation concept came into being, where they were like, what if, because they had heard about these ancient monks and sadhus, and that's one of my new episodes also, where I interviewed a qigong master who spent 100 days in darkness. 100 days. Now in the flotation tank we're like 75 minutes, right?
Yeah.
In the dark, and that has a profound effect. He was 100 days in one of the cellars beneath the monastery with darkness, but also no food, like for the most part water.
Wow.
And imagine when he came out, he was like totally disoriented. But he had a guru that he was working with, who used to come in the evening every day, and he used to give them three the small dates for the whole day. And so that was a journey by itself. So that was really fascinating. But that's what the flotation tank does, is when we deprive our senses of the darkness, of sensation, of smell, I think the body goes into a state of confusion sometimes, and that has the effect of maybe stimulating DMT or maybe certain other chemicals that make us feel these profound states of bliss. And that's how I was drawn into it, because I had heard about it a lot right on my podcast, and I've been meaning to try it out. So I tried it out last year, maybe towards August, and I've been doing at least once in a month, maybe twice so far, and it's a great experience. You get better and better at it in terms of figuring out what position, what movement is best for you, and also like music, without music, and what are you going to visualize. So there's a lot of experimenting that you can do, and I find that it's a good bonding session also. Like for me, if I want to meet a guest, or if I want to have a shared moment with a guest or somebody that I want to work with, just let's do a float. Instead of the conventional, let's have a beer, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a float.
Or let's go for a coffee.
Or a coffee, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a cold exposure, something like that.
Yeah. It's so good. I agree. I really enjoy the floating, and I think it is something you get better and better at. The first time I did it, I was pregnant, which was a really cool experience, because it felt like I was experiencing what my daughter would have been experiencing in me.
Yeah.
So it was really, really, really cool. And it just, it's definitely something, if you haven't had a chance to try it, they're all over now.
Yeah.
We just happened to go to the one in Gastown in Vancouver, Float House. But there was lots of them. And I would recommend it. You recommend it.
Yeah.
You also were talking about your problem-solving methodology. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned that. Do you use floating for problem-solving?
Yeah. There's this book. I mean, this is not a new concept. A lot of, scientists and geniuses in the past would tap into their intuition, would tap into their collective mind in terms of solving problems. I know for a fact that Albert Einstein used to do that as well, and also Leonardo da Vinci also used to do that as well. So they would like have a problem in their mind, define the problem, set the intention for solving it. They would go to sleep, morning, boom, more often than not they have the solution. So for me, it is our limited minds are here between our ears, and that can solve a lot of problems. But our higher mind, our collective intuition, that's where the real problem solving comes into play, because if we are able to tap into so much more data, it's like small data versus big data, right? The cloud computing is so much more powerful, right? So I was reminded of this idea because I had read it in the past, but I was reminded of this idea by the recent book by Stephen Kotler. He's a proponent of flow as well. I forgot what the name of the book is for some reason, but somebody can search Stephen Kotler and can come across it. But so he sort of, reading his book reminded me of trying this out with float. So set the intention, right? And I think the question that I asked was, what is the highest and best use of myself? Right? What is my actual purpose? Right? And so I went in.
Just a really casual problem-solving question.
Isn't it? Right, there's some problems that cannot
be solved. It's like
be
your
solved.
average Tuesday question. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I went into the float, came out, and I got some really great ideas, which I probably would not have been able to come up with myself, because I think when you tap into your unconscious as well as these states, you're able to tap into your conscious self, but also your dream state, as well as what is in the ethers, so to speak.
Oh, super cool. I hope that we one day get to the place where it's just so these kind of things are really common, so amazing. Because it's a different way of, rather than just like brainstorming or going over metrics and data. Like it's a different way of accessing information that I hope maybe one day, instead of the beer kegs and the ping pong tables, there'll be flotation tanks at some of the cool startups. I bet you we'll see that. I bet you we'll start to see that change.
Probably going to happen soon.
Yeah. Okay, so how about Qigong and movement? I don't know. I know a tiny little bit about Qigong. Mm-hmm. Tell me more. What is it? Should we literally just look up a YouTube video? How do you practice it?
Yeah. I think Qigong is a practice / way of life as well. It's a philosophy also, and this has multiple influences. One is Qigong actually is influenced from India, a large part of Qigong. I didn't know it myself. As well as it has influence from Taoism, which is Chinese based, right? So Qigong basically is a practice where you do these gentle movements and flows that help you tap into a state of flow or a state of bliss, and has numerous science-backed benefits for your body. So what you're doing basically in Qigong is that you're blending your visualization with movement with breathing. So and when you do that, you're able to cultivate your inner energy, right? And the implications are numerous, from the physical karate, taekwondo, to medical Qigong. There's medical Qigong as well that has numerous benefits. There is spiritual Qigong also, which is more about the Tao and the universe and your sense of purpose. So there are so many different interpretations. Now Qigong is such a big topic overall. Like some of the Taoist monks and Qigong masters are able to literally use their fingers to zap electricity into you. That's true. It's crazy. And you can, elderly people can use Qigong to live longer as well. And you see in China, right, like 10, 20, really old people, they might look old, but they're actually maybe over 100 as well, because they have tapped into Qigong and they've tapped into a sense of flow and flexibility. Because just because you're old, just because you manage to live till 100, it doesn't mean you're really healthy, right? But these people are really flexible, really nimble, and I'm sure very wise also.
Yes, so, I can visualize that. I've spent quite a bit of time in China over the years. Okay. And I can there's always like the villages, the kind of hub where these communities come together. Yeah. And there's always the people playing mahjong, and then there's always the people that are doing Qigong. And it's so beautiful. It's really cool. Yeah. I'm getting chills even just thinking about it, because it's just so powerful, like community, right? Community and togetherness and practice, just really cool. I'm sure we could do like a whole other episode on Qigong. What would you say if somebody wanted to get started? Like, what would a starting place be for practicing Qigong? Is it a certain, resource or somebody that you started with, or like how does someone start with Qigong?
Oh, okay.
With the example, because since we're not able to go to China and just join the wise elders in the square.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how I got started in Qigong. And my practice has been on and off. I don't practice Qigong every day. It's more of an intuitive thing for me. I got into Qigong, I think I would say, well, I started my fascination somewhere in 2010, 2011. Sometime in 2000, maybe 14-ish. Like with Qigong, I feel, even with yoga, it's just not about the practice. You need to have a connection with the master or guru. Somebody who you come across and something about their energy really speaks to you, and then you start practicing, right? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think here's where the quote, when the student is ready, the master will appear, really makes sense. Like, you might come across meditation all your life. You're not interested. It doesn't speak to you. When you come across one person, you're like, boom, this is it. I'm ready. Right?
Yeah.
I think that can translate to anything in life, right?
Yeah.
Like real estate wisdom as well, right? Sure, you're living in Vancouver, which is the best place for real estate, but then you come across this one mentor or person, boom, that makes sense. I'm ready, right? So in the same way, I came across this individual called Gary Garapoli, Robert Garapoli, his name is, and he's an American. But he spent a lot of years studying with Chinese masters, Taoist masters, Qigong masters. And for some reason or the other, he and his wife, I'm not sure if they're still husband and wife, but they used to do these beautiful Qigong moves, right? And I used to just follow them. And I loved every single practice that I used to do. And for me, it was a great complement to yoga and breathwork, because it does something different to you. When you're using movement and breathing and visualization, and you feel so relaxed and blissed after that. And so I ended up doing a lot of these practices, but somewhere down the line, I think, Gary Poli, he just disappeared off the internet. And that tends to happen with a lot of these masters, a lot of these practitioners. All right. And then recently I came across this video again, and I was like so amazed, right, that he's back on the internet, interwebs, and I contacted him and I reached out to him. But yeah, you'll find, like, especially with Qigong or yoga, sometimes you have people and they just disappear off the face of the planet. You don't know where they are, and then they come back again. It's almost mystical, like Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings.
That is so fascinating, because I want to pull out, I'll tell you my story, and then I want to pull out one other thing that you said there. So I have been really interested in breathwork for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'd heard about Wim Hof. And I would look up, I would Google, I would go to YouTube, and I'd look up Wim Hof breathing. Yeah. And I probably did it, I don't know. I've been doing cold exposure for probably 3 years, just about, maybe even almost 4, like a while. Yeah. And every time I looked it up, I go find nothing. And I was like, I just want to find, like, where is the guidedness? Like, how do I do this? Never could find it. In November, I had we were about to do a cold ocean swim, me and a couple of friends. And my friend had mentioned the day before, he was like, I'm going to do the Wim Hof breathing. And I was like, oh, great. Like, another thing I don't know how to do, and I looked it up. And it appeared for the first time in YouTube. Right. And it's like the weirdest thing, because I've looked it up numerous times over the years and always wondered, like, how do people know the Wim Hof method? Okay. Because it never comes up for me. Yeah. It never showed up as like a... Right. And it's just so interesting, like, just that, that, like, things disappear and then, like... Just disappear, and it's like, I think it's a fundamental nature of consciousness. I don't know how it works, but it's sort of like a dial, like things disappear and appear in consciousness. It's very mystical also, and through my interview with this Qigong master, I found a lot of mystical things. Like, a normal person would listen to that interview and totally dismiss it, because there's a magic that is involved with certain, masters and practitioners. It's crazy how they are able to tap into the unseen realm, so to speak, through their practice, through breathwork, through Qigong. Right? It's fascinating. But to answer your previous question, how did they get started? I would definitely ask them to search for Gary Garapoli, Robert Garapoli, or Robert Peng, who's the guy who I interviewed in my recent interview. Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah. And I also, what I wanted to pull out was just the part around, like, listening to your intuition around it too, and seeing what comes up. I think that's a probably valuable piece of wisdom for anything that we're talking about. And
have you watched the movie Doctor Strange?
No, what's it called? Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange.
No.
Well, he's one of the characters in the Avengers, right?
Okay,
Spider-Man
I'm not
was-
cool. I don't know a lot of movies and TV shows.
Yeah, but watch that Doctor Strange. I think it was released in 2017,
Okay.
2018. But a lot of what Hollywood is showing, they're drawing from traditions that already exist. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So,
Okay, that brings up a question
Yeah.
that we did not talk about ahead of time. And I also recognize it's a sensitive question.
Yeah.
So if this never makes it to air, it's because we've decided not to go there, and that's totally okay.
okay.
I want to know what your thoughts and perspectives are around the cultural appropriation of these practices and about the idea that these have been philosophies for a very long time. And I'm a white woman asking these questions, and I want to be, respectful of the fact that there's other cultures that created this.
Right.
And for so long, and even continuing still to this day, there are still egregious, these methodologies are still not being necessarily respected or honored or accredited. There's so much history of racism, of war, of othering people for these practices. And then now there's this shift, which I think collectively we need to have a shift. But also, like, the other side of that is that it can also be potentially, what's the word, like extorting or exploiting the very people who have had this wisdom, who have had these practices and were perhaps excluded from society because of it, or were looked down upon for it. And now that it's cool, we're taking it. And I just want to know what's your feeling on that? Where do you, how do we, what do you think? And also, like, how do we consciously step into this without further exploitation or othering or separation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And to be honest, I've heard and read a lot about it as well, right? Cultural appropriation, right? I think a lot has been appropriated in the past, and that's something we cannot really control, right? Sometimes people set up narratives that are very us versus them. For me, it is not about where you're from, because you can be an American and still be really respectful and just supportive of the tradition of yoga and Vedanta and Tantra. And you can be Indian and still, like, largely reject. So it's not about us versus them. At the end of the day, what I'd like to see more of is more diversity, basically, like more inclusiveness, so that whether the event is taking place in New York or, for that matter, India or even Vancouver, you include people of all spectrums of society, whether the person is Indian or, Canadian or American, or whether the person is young or old. If you're able to go toward that place, that would be, for me, a win, rather than saying, this is appropriation, that is, because I'm wearing trousers right now, I'm wearing a shirt. That is, right, largely European, if you think about it. And so I think that if you go down that route, for me, is, then it's all about playing the blame game, right? Hey, well, how come you're wearing a shirt and pant? How come you're wearing a tie, right? And somebody says, you're not supposed to wear a dreadlock. Then it's like, you're always pointing blame on the other person, because it never ends. I think at the end of the day, if you're not hurting sentiments, that's a good start. And also taking time to understand the origins, while at the same time really sensing into what the ultimate goal for this is and how we can support each other. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that really deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And also, like, yes. I mean, it's such a hard, how do I want to say hard? It's just like a space that I'm just trying to lean into and listen and understand more than speak.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you throwing just throwing that question at you. And your just graciousness around it. And that's a lot of the similar sentiment that I've heard, that I feel as well, that I've experienced, that if it can be done in a really open, respectful, curious way that pays homage to where this came from, that understands the tradition and the purpose and the intention, and that we're doing it in a way that doesn't like then exclude those people all over again, but we're actually bringing people together.
Yeah.
That we are, because I believe like that's the future, right? It's not the us versus them. It never was us versus them.
Yeah.
It's still not us versus them, whatever that even means, whoever us is, whoever them is. But it's about bringing us together, and to do that, I do think there's probably also some healing that needs to happen.
Exactly.
On all levels. I believe that there's also just like we have to be willing and curious, and I think most people are, like, most people want to know where, like, where did this come from, and like what is the history of it, and bring respect to that. So
100%. And also, just to add, there are a lot of really notable, experienced, heart-based people based out of America who have, like you point out, taken the intention, taken the time, taken the respect to really learn about yoga and Ayurveda and Tantra. Like, for example, Dr. David Frawley is one person. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, he's an American.
Okay.
But he changed his name. And I think he's living in America, but he spent a lot of time in India also. And he's one of the strongest proponents of yoga, Vedanta Tantra, like the way it was taught. Dr. David Frawley, highly respected. And there are a lot of other people also that are championing the cause of spreading yoga and meditation the way it was supposed to be, in a way that is diverse, inclusive, and heart-based. At the end of the day, it's not very verbal, right? This is heart-based, and people can sense into it. So that is where I'm coming from. But sometimes, when corporates are just exploiting it for the sake of it, there's nothing wrong in profit and loss, but just for the sake of it, at the expense of the traditions, that's when people, I think, have problems. But if we can, come together and look at the intention for the practice, I think, like for us also, just to add, like a lot of Indians are also very disconnected with our own roots because of what happened due to colonization, right? There were like a lot of practices and systemic, right, techniques that were used to disassociate Indians itself from things like yoga, meditation, and religion also. And over the years, we had, not right now, but we had developed a resentment towards our own indigenous practices. And I think that happened in Canada as well, right? So I think there's a collective healing that's going on as we realize, oh wow, we had a treasure all the while, and we had some amazing people as well, right? So I think while that has happened, the whole world is healing in one way or the other, right? So that's why this can be such a complex topic to navigate, and I totally appreciate you for sharing this. So, but I think the more we share the practice together, that's when we can draw upon this collective wisdom, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel that, and appreciate that, and I think most people really want to be inclusive and respectful, and it's really can be challenging to navigate because of the history and all things that are really valid hurts that deserve to be healed. So I appreciate your openness, and really deeply appreciate you sharing your perspective, and also like sharing the magic that you have with us, for your culture, your practice, everything. We're so blessed to get to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise. It was really nice to chat with you. And
I'm not done yet. I got a few more questions.
No, I know. I'm just saying, every time I chat with you, I learn something new. So it's really been nice to get to know you and know you even more now.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you. Yeah. I'm like, wait, you can't go yet. I'm just, okay, well, I promise we'll keep moving. Okay. As you can hear, Aditya and I get into a lot of deep conversations. And we talked about a lot of powerful modalities, including breathwork, yawning. I mean, who knew that? The power of brief intermittent hypoxia, holding your breath, and creating altered state of consciousness through floating, qigong, and how we can all move forward respectfully and consciously with these practices. Join in for the next episode. It's going to be the third and the last one with Aditya, number 68. In the next episode, we're going to even explore more modalities, including Vedanta, Ayurvedic oil baths, and cold exposure. One of the things I love the most about Aditya is his ability to blend grounded spirituality with tangible examples, science, biology, and neurosciences to explain why these practices work on a head, heart, and soul level. And you'll hear him continue to do that in the last episode. Oh, and we talk about just some little things like what is our purpose here on Earth? How do our guides and ancestors show up in life? And a whole lot more deep and beautiful spiritual richness. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out the next episode for some beautiful breathwork, an opportunity to join into Aditya's breathwork sessions for free as a thank you for being here. Big love, my friend, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. If something spoke to you, send me a message by sharing this episode and tagging me on social media. If you know someone who would love to hear this episode, please share it with them too. Because I love surprises, make sure you subscribe to the Goalden Girls podcast today. It's the only way to find out about bonus surprise episodes and make sure you don't miss a single beat on your Goalden journey. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode of the Goalden Girls podcast.